Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going back almost 2,000 years to one ordinary day in the life of an ordinary man, a baker in the city of Rome. But before we begin, there is something you should know. You don't need to remember any of this. There will be no test, no names you have to keep track of, no dates, nothing to hold on to. If you drift away in the middle of a sentence, that's not a failure. That's the whole idea. The story will go on without you, quietly, like rain on a roof. And if you wake later and hear my voice still going, you can simply drift again. So settle into your pillow. Let the blanket be heavy. Let your eyes close whenever they'd like to. Just listen and let go. And if nights like this turn out to help you, there's a new story here every week. But you can decide all that tomorrow. Tonight, nothing is asked of you at all. Our story begins in the dark, in the quietest hour Rome ever knows. It is long before dawn in the city of Rome. The year doesn't matter much. Somewhere in the reign of a calm and forgettable emperor. A good time for bread, a good time for sleep. The city is as quiet as it will ever be. Rome is never entirely silent. It is too big for that, too full of life. But in this hour, the noise has softened into something almost like breathing. A dog somewhere, 3 streets away. The far-off creak of a delivery cart on stone, and under it all, always the sound of water. The public fountains running all night because no one has ever needed to turn them off. Water falling into stone basins in the dark. It has been falling like that all night. It will fall like that for centuries. In a narrow street in the Subura district, between a shuttered wine shop and a coppersmith's workshop, there is a bakery, a pistrinum, the Romans would call it, but you don't need to remember that. It is simply the bakery. The neighborhood knows it by its smell. Above the bakery, in a small room with a small window, a man is asleep under a woolen blanket. His name is Marcus. He is neither young nor old. His hands are strong from years of the same good work, and his hair carries a faint dusting of gray at the temples, though in his trade it is hard to say how much is age and how much is flour. In a moment he will wake. He always does at this hour, without anyone calling him. Bakers carry the dawn inside their bodies. But for now, one more breath, the room is still. The window is a pale rectangle, barely lighter than the wall. The air smells of yesterday's bread, of wool, of the faint cold char of a lamp blown out hours ago. From the street below, the fountain murmurs. Marcus opens his eyes, not suddenly, the way a door swings when the latch is already loose. He lies there for a moment, listening, the blanket up to his chin. He is checking the city the way you might check the weather. The cart sounds far away. The dog has given up. Good. It is early then. The right kind of early. He sits up slowly, and the rope bed creaks beneath him, a sound so familiar he no longer hears it. His feet find the floorboards. The wood is cool but not cold. The last warmth of yesterday's oven still lives in the walls of this house the way it always does. A baker's house never fully cools. All night the bricks below have been letting go of their heat, slowly, patiently into the rooms above. He dresses in the dark. There is no need for a lamp. A tunic, worn soft by 100 washings. A leather belt. He knows every fold by touch. Down the narrow stairs, one hand on the wall. The stairs, too, creak in their usual places, and he steps past those places without thinking, an old duet between a man and his house. And then he is in the bakery itself, and the smell surrounds him completely. It is not the smell of baking, not yet. It is the quieter smell that lives underneath. Cold ash, worn stone, old flour lying in the seams of the floorboards, the faint sourness of the leaven jar waiting on its shelf. To a stranger, it might be nothing. To Marcus, it is the smell of his entire life. His father worked the same room, the same oven, some of the same wooden peels, their handles polished pale by 2 lifetimes of palms. He stands a moment in the middle of the dark room. He always does. You might think he is planning the day. He is not. There is nothing to plan. The day is the same day, every day. And this, in a world as loud and uncertain as Rome, is a kind of wealth. Bread, after all, is patient work. You cannot rush a rising. You cannot argue with an oven. The dough sets the pace and the man follows it, slowly in order, one quiet task and then the next. And so the day begins, the way it always begins, with fire. But first, water. He crosses to the doorway, unbars the heavy shutter, and steps into the street. The air outside is cool and moving, the darkness soft at its edges. Overhead, between the leaning rooftops, the stars are still out, thinner now, wearier, but there. The fountain stands at the corner, its water silver black in the starlight, falling and falling into its worn stone basin. Marcus dips his jar. The water numbs his fingers pleasantly. Somewhere in the hills far beyond the city, this water began its journey days ago, walking the long stone aqueducts on their tall arches, crossing valleys in the dark, just to arrive here, at this corner, at this hour, for this man and his bread. He never thinks about that, but you can if you like. It's a good thought to fall asleep to. All that patient water moving slowly across the countryside, while the whole city dreams. He stands a moment longer at the fountain because the hour is good and no one is waiting. Above him, the great apartment house across the street rises into the dark, floor upon floor, shutter upon shutter, and behind every shutter, sleepers. The whole block is one gentle mountain of sleep. 100 people, 200, stacked to the roofline in their beds and their borrowed warmth. The school teacher, his lamp long out. The laundry girls in their shared room under the tiles. The old woman on the 3rd floor, who will be his first customer, dreaming, no doubt, of driving a hard bargain. If you could hear them all at once, it would sound like a slow tide. In a way, you can. That is what this hour of a city is, the sound of everyone breathing at once, with the fountains keeping time. His father used to stand here too, in this same spot, at this same hour, with this same jar. He never said why. Marcus never asked. Some things a trade hands down without wrapping them in words. The way to read an oven's white walls, the way to fold a morning around a fire, the way to stand at a dark fountain for one unnecessary minute, only because the water sounds better before dawn than it ever will again all day. The cold works up through his sandals from the paving stones. Each stone is worn to a soft dip in its center by feet. His father's, everyone's, 200 years of small errands. Even the street here is a kind of bed, everything in it shaped slowly by use into the form of comfort. He carries the jar inside and sets it down by the kneading trough and rolls his shoulders once. And so the morning goes on, slowly. There is no hurry in it. There never is. The oven is the heart of the house, and like every heart, it is never entirely cold. It stands at the back of the bakery, a great rounded vault of brick, taller than a man, older than its owner. Its mouth is a dark arch, edged with soot that no scrubbing has ever fully removed, and never will. Inside, under a gray blanket of ash, a few embers from yesterday are still alive, faint, patient, waiting. Marcus kneels at the oven's mouth. This is the first real work of every day, and he does it the way his father taught him, which is the way that works, gently. He reaches in with a long iron rake and draws the ash aside, slowly in soft gray folds. The embers appear, a handful of dim orange eyes opening in the dark. He leans close and breathes on them, once, twice, long, slow breaths, the kind you are taking now. The embers brighten with each breath, as if remembering something. Onto them he lays the thinnest twigs first, dry vine cuttings, brittle as old paper, saved in bundles from a vineyard outside the walls. They catch almost at once, a small crackling, a little light, the first light of the day, and it belongs to him alone. Then the thicker sticks, then in a while, the split oak. There is no rushing this, and Marcus does not try. Fire, like dough, like sleep, comes in its own time, and comes better if you don't stare at it. He builds the small flame its house of wood, and then leaves it to grow, the way you leave a child to sleep. The light spreads slowly across the room behind him. Shadows of the long wooden peels swing gently on the wall, like reeds in slow water. The bricks around the oven mouth begin, very softly, to tick. The sound of stone warming, the sound of a house stretching. While the fire takes hold, Marcus turns to the leaven. On a shelf above the kneading trough sits a covered clay pot, and inside it lives the oldest worker in this bakery, the starter. A cup full of yesterday's dough, saved back, fed with flour and water, kept warm near the oven's residual heat. It has been alive in one form or another, longer than Marcus has. His father kept it before him. It is, in its quiet way, the family inheritance. Not silver, not land, a sour, breathing handful of dough. He lifts the lid and smells it, out of habit. The smell is sharp and alive, faintly like apples, faintly like wine. Good, it slept well. Everything in this room, you begin to notice, is alive in its own slow way. The embers under the ash, the leaven in its pot, the warmth in the bricks. A bakery at night is not a dead place waiting for morning. It is a place where many small patient things are quietly keeping themselves warm, keeping themselves ready, breathing at their own speed in the dark. And the baker moves among them like a keeper in a garden, tending one, then another. Nothing needs him urgently. Everything needs him gently. The fire is standing on its own now, filling the oven's arch with moving gold. It will burn for a long while yet. The oven must drink in all that heat, store it deep in its bricks, before any bread goes in. The flames are for the walls, not the loaves. Later, when the fire has burned down and been swept aside, it is the walls themselves that will bake, their held warmth given back slowly, evenly, with no flame at all. You could say the oven bakes with its memory of the fire. That is close enough to true. And it is not only bread that this memory will serve. All day, neighbors will come with their own dishes, a clay pot of beans, a tray of little cheese pastries, a piece of pork sealed under herbs. Because almost no one in these tall, crowded houses has an oven of their own, or would be allowed one if they asked. The city has strong opinions about fire in upstairs rooms, and the city is right. So the bakery's oven is the street's oven, The whole neighborhood cooks, in a sense, at Marcus's hearth. For a small coin, he slides their suppers into the warm dark after his loaves come out and mines them, and the afternoon smells of 40 families' dinners in slow rotation. His oven is the closest thing the street has to a shared fireplace. Perhaps that is why the bakery gets a kind of affection that the wine shop, for all its obvious advantages, never quite earns. Everyone's supper has spent time in Marcus's walls. Everyone's evening carries a little of his fire home, in a covered pot, held with a cloth, walked carefully up 3 flights of stairs. The fire has settled now from its first eagerness into a steady, working flame. It leans and returns, in the draft from the flue, regular as a sleeper's chest. Marcus stands before it a moment, one forearm resting on the warm brick, and watches the flames move. Even for a man who has seen this 10,000 mornings, it is hard not to watch. Fire at this hour asks nothing of anyone. It just moves and breathes and softly hums its single soft word, hush, hush, hush. Outside, the sky between the rooftops has turned from black to a deep, sleepy blue. The stars are letting go, one by one. And so the morning goes on, slowly, warmly, in its usual order. The fire settling into the bricks, the leaven waking in its pot, the city still mostly dreaming, 3 floors up, all around. There is nowhere to hurry to. Everything is exactly on time. Now comes the part of the day that Marcus loves best, though he has never said so aloud, and never will. The dough. The flour was milled 2 streets away, at the big bakery that keeps its own donkeys. Patient, round-bellied animals that walk in slow circles all day, turning the heavy stone mills, and are fed better than some poets. From there it comes to Marcus in coarse sacks, and it is good flour, wheat from Egypt and Africa mostly, cross the whole sea in the bellies of grain ships to become, this morning, this particular bread, in this narrow street. Think for a moment, in the loose wandering way this hour permits, of how far this flour has come. It began as a green field beside the Nile a year ago, further from this street than most Romans will ever travel. It stood all winter under an Egyptian sun, went gold, was cut with sickles, and threshed and winnowed until the air was full of drifting chaff like warm snow. It crossed the sea in the deep hold of a grain ship, one of those broad, patient vessels that do not hurry for anyone. For weeks it wallowed along, the seabirds following. In its one hull, enough breakfast for 100,000 strangers. It came up the river on a barge hauled by oxen walking the towpath, slower than a man strolls. It waited in the cool dark of a warehouse by the docks, in mountains of grain taller than houses, watched over by patient warehouse cats. And then the mill, and the slow circles of the patient donkeys, and the sacks, and the handcart, and the boy, and this trough, this morning, this man. Half the world moving slowly for years, so that one street can smell like breakfast. It is the kind of fact that would be overwhelming at noon. At this hour it is only soothing, all that vastness, all that patience, funneling down to something as small and warm as a loaf. He tips the flour into the great wooden trough, and it falls with a soft, continuous whisper, raising a pale mist that turns gold at the edges, where the firelight catches it. The mist settles slowly on his forearms, on his eyebrows, on every surface in the room, as it has settled every morning for 30 years. There are corners of this bakery where the flour of a decade lies soft as snowfall. Then the water, warmed a little by standing near the oven. Then the leaven, scooped from its pot, sour and alive. Then salt, good gray salt from the flats at Ostia, where the sea is patiently turned into fields of white. And then he pushes his hands into the mixture, and the day truly begins. Kneading is not exciting work, and that is its beauty. Fold, press, turn, fold, press, turn. The dough at first is shaggy and reluctant, sticking to his fingers, unsure of itself. He is not bothered. He knows what it will become. His hands know it without him. Fold, press, turn. His breathing settles into the rhythm, or perhaps the rhythm settles into his breathing. After 30 years, it is impossible to say which follows which. The rope of muscle in his forearms rises and softens, rises and softens. The trough creaks its steady creak. Somewhere behind him, a knot of oak pops softly in the oven, and the light gives a single, unhurried flicker, like a slow blink. Fold, press, turn. If you were standing in the doorway watching, and you can if you like, there is room and no one will mind, you would see the dough slowly change under his hands. It gathers itself. It grows smooth and calm and begins to hold together, the way scattered thoughts do in the last minutes before sleep. What was loose becomes settled. What was rough becomes soft. It happens so gradually that there is no moment you could point to and say, there, that is when it changed. It is simply that, after a while, the change has happened. There is an old Greek saying that all things flow. Marcus has never read the philosophers, but his hands could have told them. He works and the room warms around him, and the windows go from deep blue to pale gray without his noticing. This is the hour when the bakery is its own small world, complete. Firelight, flour mist, the creak of wood, the smell of leaven and oak smoke braided together. The city outside might be anything, an ocean, a forest. It doesn't matter yet. Morning is still only a rumor out there. When the dough is smooth, when it answers his palm with a slow, drowsy spring, like a sleeper turning over, he gathers it into a great pale round, covers it with linen, and lets it be. This is the other secret of bread, the one hurried people never learn. Most of the work is done by no one. The dough rises alone, in the dark, under its cloth. The leaven breathes, the dough swells softly, at the pace of a sleeping chest. All the baker does is wait, and waiting, done rightly, is a skill, maybe the oldest one. Marcus is good at waiting. He wipes the trough. He sharpens the peel's edge lightly with a stone. He drinks a cup of water and eats a heel of yesterday's loaf, standing in the doorway, watching the street come slowly out of the dark. The coppersmith's shutters are still closed. Above the wine shop, someone's shutter opens instead, and a sleepy hand takes in a hanging cloth from the sill. High over the rooftops, the first swifts of the morning are up. Thin dark curves against a sky the color of watered milk, wheeling and wheeling without a single wing beat you can hear. And under it all, the fountain, still falling. It has not stopped once, all this while. It has been falling the whole time you've been listening. And so the morning goes on, slowly, the dough rising in its trough, the fire sinking into embers, the sky brightening by degrees no one can see. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. The bread doesn't need you to watch it rise. Nothing here needs anything from you at all. By the time the dough has doubled, the light in the street has turned honest and gray, and Rome is beginning, reluctantly, to wake. Marcus turns the dough out onto the floured table, and it comes free of the trough with a soft sigh, the sound of a thing well rested. He cuts it with a wooden blade into even pieces, weighing each in his hand for a heartbeat. No scales. His palm is the scale. 30 years of mornings have calibrated it better than any instrument in the market. One by one, he shapes the loaves. His hands move in small circles, tucking each round of dough under itself, tightening its pale skin until it sits plump and composed on the board, like a cat settling. 8 loaves, 10, 12, in rows on the long board, each dusted with flour, each resting a little apart from its neighbors, the way sleepers keep a courteous distance in a shared room. On each one, with a bronze stamp, he presses his mark, the sign of his bakery, set into the soft dough the way a signet sets into wax. Then, with a thin cord and a practiced hand, he scores the top of each loaf into 8 neat wedges, the way Roman loaves are always divided so they can be broken fairly at the table. For a moment, each loaf looks like a pale full moon, mapped. You would recognize these loaves if you saw them. 2,000 years from this morning, people will still be baking round loaves, still marking them into wedges to share fairly at the table. Bread outlasts almost everything in its way. The shape of it, the idea of it. It is one of the oldest things a pair of hands can still do exactly as hands once did. Marcus knows nothing of that and would not be much impressed. He is thinking that the oven is nearly ready. The fire inside has burned itself down to a low bed of coals, and the bricks of the vault have gone from black to a dusty, glowing white. The sign his father taught him to read before he could read anything else. He rakes the coals out into the iron bin by the door, where they will sit and dim like a setting constellation. Then he takes a damp cloth on a long pole and sweeps the oven floor clean, and the hot bricks hiss softly under the cloth, a sound like the sea, heard from very far away. The oven stands open and empty now, breathing out heat. Its walls hold the whole fire's memory, enough for the morning's bread and the afternoon's, and still it will be warm at midnight when the next handful of embers goes to sleep under the ash. One by one, Marcus slides the loaves onto the long wooden peel, and one by one, with a short practice push, sends them gliding to their places on the hot brick floor. They sit there in the glowing dark of the vault in rows like pale round houses in an amber evening. He seals the oven's mouth with its iron door. And now the bakery enters its most secret hour, the hour when the bread is baking and nothing shows. From outside the iron door, silence, or nearly. But Marcus knows the whole hidden drama by heart, the way you know a story told to you in childhood. In the first minutes, the loaves are startled by the heat. Their skins tighten, and deep inside, the leaven's long night of patient work spends itself in one last rising rush, the crumb blooming open like a slow yawn. Then the surface is set. Then slowly, the gold begins. Pale at first, the color of straw, deepening shade by shade toward chestnut, the stamped lines in the 8 wedges rising into relief like hills on a small map. None of this can be seen. All of it can be trusted. Most of the good work of the world, his father used to say, happens behind an iron door, in the warm dark, unwatched. Marcus keeps his time not by any clock. The street sundial is 2 corners away, and famously a liar, but by the smell which cannot lie, and by an inner reckoning that 30 years have wound as tight and true as any water clock in a rich man's hall. He putters as he waits. He flours the boards for the next batch. He stacks the cooled peels. He steps out, looks at the sky, comes back in. A man baking bread looks idle the way a ship at anchor looks idle. Everything important is happening below the waterline. And there is pleasure in this stretch of the morning that he would be embarrassed to name. The work is committed. Nothing can be added, nothing corrected. For these minutes the day runs entirely on trust. Trust in the fire he built at black dawn, the dough he judged by palm, the walls his father's father fired. All the mornings of his line are baking with him. It is as close as a working man's day comes to a held breath, and it ends the way held breath should, gently, with bread. And now again, the baker's oldest work, waiting. He steps to the doorway and leans against the frame, arms floured to the elbow, and watches his street finish waking. The coppersmith is unbarring his shutters at last, yawning enormously, scratching his beard with both hands. Two slaves from the big house on the corner pass with yoked water jars, talking low. A cat flows down from a rooftop, along a wall, and vanishes into the alley by the wine shop on business of its own. The sky above the street is pearl now. Somewhere east, out past the city gates, past the tombs and the pines along the old road. The sun is up over the countryside, but sunlight takes its time reaching the floor of a Subura street. Down here, dawn is always secondhand, arriving as a general paleness, a warming of the gray. Marcus has not seen an actual sunrise in years. He does not feel the loss. He has the oven. The oven is his private east. And from behind its iron door, now, the smell begins. It comes faintly at first, under the smoke smell, a sweetness, a roundness, the smell of grain becoming something better than grain. It slips out through the seams of the door, gathers in the room, then drifts past Marcus in the doorway and out into the street, where it turns left and right and goes wandering along the house fronts like a town crier who only ever brings good news. Windows open above as it passes. It is better than any cockcrow. The street does not wake to light in this city. It wakes to bread. And so the morning goes on, slowly. For a little while there is nothing to tell. Only the oven, breathing. Only the fountain falling. Only a man in a doorway, in a street going pale, and the small sounds a city makes when it is still deciding whether to wake. If you have drifted, stay drifted. The bread will come out on time whether anyone is listening or not. They begin arriving before the first loaves are even out. The first is always the same. The old woman from the third floor across the way, wrapped in a shawl the color of dusk, with her copper coin ready and her opinion of the weather prepared. She has bought her bread here since Marcus's Father's Day, and she calls Marcus boy, and will until one of them dies, and he would not correct her for the world. The iron door opens. The heat rolls out, thick with that smell, and the loaves come out golden on the peel, one by one, and are set to cool on the rack by the counter. Though cool is a hopeful word, most of them will be sold too warm to hold comfortably, passed from hand to hand like well-behaved coals. The old woman takes the first loaf against her shawl, pays her as, tells him the wind is turning, and her knee agrees, and shuffles home. The exchange has not varied in 15 years. It is one of the fixed stars of the street. After her, the morning proper, a stream of neighbors, none in much of a hurry, all half awake, all reaching for the same warm thing. The school teacher who rents the room over the coppersmith, buying his single small loaf, already muttering the day's lines of Virgil to himself. The girls from the laundry, sent out with 1 coin between them, choosing their loaf with the gravity of senators. A litter bearer on his way to the big house, tearing his bread and eating as he walks, leaving a thin trail of crumbs and contentment behind him. Sparrows follow him like an honor guard. The bathhouse stoker comes in on his way to work, smelling already of smoke before his day of smoke begins, and buys 2 loaves. One for now, one, he says every morning, for later, though later has never once arrived. The second loaf is always gone by the corner. The mule drivers from the wine delivery take their bread standing in the doorway, spelling each other, one eating while one watches the mules. A house slave from 2 streets over collects the tall stack of flat loaves her kitchen ordered, balancing them like roof tiles, counting them twice with her lips moving. And there is the poet. Every street has one. He rents a corner of a room somewhere up under the tiles, and he is writing something enormous. It has been enormous for years. And he pays for his small loaf with coins when he has them, and when he does not, Marcus takes payment in a line or 2 of verse, recited across the counter with tremendous seriousness. It is, they both privately suspect, bad verse, but it is a fair price. Bread is daily, so is poetry, the way the poet does it. They are in the same trade of rising early and working a soft material with patience, and they nod to each other as fellow craftsmen. The neighbors' cooking pots begin arriving too, now that the loaves are out. Beans, a barley stew, a tray of little cheeses under a cloth, each handed over with its instructions, each instruction identical. Not too long, mind. Marcus lines the pots up on the shelf by the oven door, minds none of the instructions and all of the pots, and gets it right as he does every day. By noon, his oven will have fed households that have never cooked a thing in it themselves. Marcus hands loaves across the worn stone counter, drops coins into the wooden box, exchanges the small standing sentences of the street. Warm morning, good crowd at the fountain, the wine shop's getting a delivery, mind the mules. Nothing anyone says matters, and that is exactly the point. This is not conversation. It is the neighborhood breathing. You could stand here all morning, off to the side, and let it wash past you. The voices blur pleasantly from up close into a kind of surf. A word rising here, a laugh settling there. Coins click into the box. The rack refills. The smell renews itself with each opening of the iron door, wave upon warm wave. Rome up close in the morning is not marble. That Rome, the forums, the temples, the emperors on their horses, is a mile away and might as well be another country. This Rome is brick and bread. It is 100 narrow streets like this one, each with its fountain, its bakery, its old woman with her opinion of the weather. The empire is very large. A morning is very small. And of the two, Marcus would tell you, the morning is the more reliable. Mid-morning, the pace gentles. The counter crowd thins to a trickle. A second batch goes into the oven. The walls have plenty of heat left, will have for hours, and Marcus finally sits down on the stool by the doorway with a cup of watered wine and the day's first idle minute. The street is fully awake now. Sun down one wall to the second-story windows. The coppersmith's hammer has started its patient tink. Tink, tink, a sound that will keep the street company clear till dusk. So steady that in an hour no one will hear it anymore, the way you stop hearing your own heart. A mule cart is unloading amphorae at the wine shop, each jar received with ceremony and complaint. Overhead, between the buildings, laundry lines cross the street like the rigging of a ship, shirts and cloths filling and emptying in the small wind, sailing nowhere all day long. Marcus watches it all with his back against his warm wall, in the particular contentment of a man whose hardest work is behind him by the hour most people begin. The morning has been the same as 1,000 mornings. The bread rose, the oven held, the street came, was fed, and went. Whatever the day does now, the essential thing is already accomplished. And so the day goes on, slowly, as days here do. If you have drifted and missed the crowd, no matter. They'll come again tomorrow. The same faces, the same coins, the same warm loaves passing over the same worn stone. Nothing in this street ever happens only once. That is what makes it worth telling stories about, and what makes it safe to sleep through. Afternoon in Rome moves like honey. The sun has found the floor of the street at last and lies across it in a wide, warm band. In the band, 3 dogs sleep in a loose committee. The coppersmith's hammer has slowed to the occasional thoughtful tap, as if the copper and the man had agreed to differ. Even the fountain sounds lazier, though it runs exactly as it always runs. This is the hour of small things. Marcus eats his midday meal on the stool by the door. Bread, his own naturally, the loaf with the crooked stamp that no customer would take, with soft cheese, a handful of olives, a few dried figs, and the last of the watered wine. He eats slowly, watching the street's slow theater, dropping an olive pit now and then into his palm. The girls from the laundry pass again the other way, carrying folded linens stacked to their chins, walking with the exaggerated care of acrobats. The school teacher's window is open, and down drifts the sound of his students reciting, a ragged chorus of boys' voices chanting their letters, losing the thread, being patiently rewound. It is, Marcus thinks, a little like the sound of dough being kneaded, the same thing folded over and over until it becomes smooth. He dozes briefly, sitting up in the way of tradesmen everywhere. 10 breaths deep, no more, one ear still keeping shop. A cart passes, he surfaces, checks the street, and settles again. Sometime in the middle of the afternoon, a rain comes over. It is not a storm, nothing so ambitious, just one of those low silver summer clouds that wander in from the sea, water the city like a careful gardener, and move on. The light goes pewter. The first drops land fat and separate on the paving stones, each one printing its own dark coin, and then the coins run together, and then the whole street is one soft shining sheet, hissing gently. The street reorganizes itself without fuss. The dogs relocate under the wine shop's awning, aggrieved but dry. The laundry lines are already empty. The laundry girls can smell rain an hour off. It is a professional sense. Marcus moves his stool 1 foot back, just inside his doorway, into that best of all seats, dry, warm, with a full view of the weather, doing its work on somebody else's afternoon. The rain fills the street with sounds that the sun keeps hidden. The gurgle in the terracotta gutters, the changed voice of the fountain, busier, muddled, talking over itself. Water finding its old paths down the walls, paths it remembers from the last rain, and the 100 before. The city drinks through every crack of it. You can almost hear the cisterns under the courtyards counting. It lasts as long as a slow meal, and then it is done. The cloud goes off to rain on the hills. The sun comes back down the wall, gently steaming. The stones dry from their centers outward, keeping dark rings around their edges a while, like memories they are not quite finished with. The dogs return their committee to its patch, which is now both warm and washed. The whole street smells of wet stone and warm dust. That smell that has no name in Latin either, but which every Roman knows means, the afternoon has been rinsed and the evening will be sweet. And if that little rain has made you sleepier, good. Rain on someone else's street, long ago, is among the most reliable sleep medicines ever discovered. There is more day left, but none of it is yours to do. Let it be his. Inside, the bakery is doing its quiet afternoon work by itself. The second batch is out and sold or cooling. A third, smaller batch, the evening bread for households that eat late, is shaped and drowsing under linen. The oven's iron door is shut on its banked warmth. The flour mist has settled. The room stands in a soft brown light, tidy and ticking faintly with heat, like a ship at anchor. Later, he does the small chores that stitch a trade together. He counts the morning's coins into small stacks, unhurried twice, sweeps the floor with the worn broom, raising a last ghost of flour into the sunbeam, where it turns and glitters and settles elsewhere, as flour does. You do not defeat flour, you merely negotiate with it. He feeds the leaven pot its flour and water for tomorrow and sets it back on its warm shelf, where it will spend all night quietly breathing, dreaming its sour little dreams. He speaks with the miller's boy, who comes by with tomorrow's flour on a handcart and stays for the heel of a loaf in 3 separate rumors, all of which contradict one another, all of which the boy believes completely. Something about a senator, something about a horse, something about a fire in the warehouse district that turns out, on examination, to have been a large amount of smoke from a small amount of sausage. The empire's news arrives in this street pre-softened, like bread dipped in wine, and no one is the worse for it. There is an hour deep in the Roman afternoon when the whole city agrees, without a word, without a law, though it is the most obeyed law in the empire, to stop. It happens now. The sun stands its heaviest. The shutters that opened at dawn close again, softly, one after another, up and down the street, up and down every street from the river to the walls. The great and the small alike surrender. Somewhere the senator on his marble bench, here the coppersmith on the sacks in his back room, above the wine shop, the wine cellar across 2 stools, and in a strip of shade by the fountain, with a devotion the philosophers could learn from, the dogs. The city's sounds thin out to almost an inventory. The fountain, a dove on a tile ridge somewhere, saying its 5 soft syllables and pausing, and saying them again, as if patiently teaching them to the roof. A child's voice once, far off, hushed by someone, the dry whisper of the awnings breathing in and out on their poles. Under it all, that fine, continuous hum a hot afternoon makes out of nothing at all. The sound, perhaps, of the light itself, lying heavy on 100,000 tiles. Rome, which conquered the world, is unconscious, and the world is running perfectly well without it. Marcus does not fight the hour. Only fools and messengers are awake in it. He sets a stool back in the deep shade inside his doorway, stretches his legs, folds his flowery forearms, and lets his chin find his chest. He does not exactly sleep. A shopkeeper's afternoon rest is a shallow bay, not open water, but he anchors there, rocking, half hearing the dove, half counting its syllables, losing count, not minding, beginning again. If ever you are given 1 hour out of all of history to be idle in, you could do far worse than choose this one. The band of sun climbs the far wall as the afternoon leans. The dogs relocate their committee twice following it. The swifts come back to the strip of sky and resume their high, silent wheeling. And so the afternoon goes on, slowly, coins counted, floors swept, rumors traded, nothing urgent under the sun. If you have been drifting, you have missed nothing that will not happen again tomorrow, in the same order, at the same hour, in the same warm light. Evening arrives in the street the way sleep arrives in a body, first at the edges. The light goes amber, then rose, then a dusty violet that seems to rise out of the stones themselves. The copper smith's hammer falls silent for good. There is the bang and rattle of his shutters and his enormous final yawn, which the whole street could set its clock by. The laundry lines are hauled in, window by window. The smell of 100 small dinners begins to thread down into the street. Lentils, onions, grilled fish somewhere, someone smoking lamp wick. Marcus sells his last loaves in the blue half-light. The evening bread, still faintly warm at the heart, to tired people walking home who tuck it under their arms like something rescued. When the rack is empty, he stands a moment behind his counter, palms flat on the cool stone, in the shopkeeper's old evening arithmetic. Bread baked, bread sold, nothing wasted, everyone fed. The ledger balances. It nearly always does. Bread is a business with very few bad days because no one ever decides against breakfast. He closes the heavy shutters, slides the bar, and banks the oven for the night, raking the few live embers together into a small glowing hill, and drawing the gray ash over them, tucking them in. Under that blanket they will hold their warmth till the hour before dawn, when a man kneels and breathes on them, and the whole patient wheel turns again. The bakery shuttered is a held breath. The leaven breathes on its shelf. The bricks tick, cooling by degrees. They will never fully surrender. Tomorrow is already begun in here, quietly in the dark. Tomorrow always is. But the day has one more pleasure in it, and Marcus takes it, as he does most evenings. He walks. Not far, and nowhere in particular. That is the whole art of it. Down the street to the fountain first, where the evening water fetchers stand talking in twos and threes, jars on hips, in no hurry at all now that the day is spent. He trades good evenings, dips a hand, drinks from his palm. The water is cold and tastes faintly of stone and distance. Then on by streets he has known since before he could walk them alone, as the lamps come out. Rome at night is lit the way a sky is starred. Not planned, just accumulated. A lamp in a doorway here, a torch by a stair, the glow of a cookshop's charcoal, window after window going dim gold up the dark faces of the buildings, floor above floor, all the way up to where the real stars are coming out over the rooftops to complete the arrangement. From an open window comes a woman singing to a child, one of those songs that is half words and half drift. From another, an argument about money conducted entirely in whispers, which somehow carry further. A watchman passes with his lantern and his ladder on his rounds. But his rounds tonight are quiet ones, and his lantern swings easy at his side. From the great streets a mile off comes the low continuous rumble of the delivery carts, which are allowed in only at night, and which will grumble through the dark hours like distant weather. Romans complain that the carts spoil their sleep. Romans have slept through them for 300 years. The complaint is part of the lullaby. Tonight the circuit runs a little longer because the evening is fine and the rain has left the air rinsed and soft. He walks as far as the rise where his street bends, and there for a moment the city opens. Below and beyond, in the last violet light, rooftops without number, stepping down toward the river valley, each one a shade of tile red going gray. Lamplit windows scattered across the slopes like embers raked over a dark hearth. Far off on their hills the temples, small from here and quiet, their gilded roofs holding the very last of the western light the way a bowl holds water. The great forums lie somewhere down in that pooling dusk, empty now of everyone but their statues. All that marble, all those speeches, gone home for the night like everybody else. Rome, the capital of the world, closes early. It is Rome, the neighborhood that stays up modestly with its lamps and suppers. And threading under everything, faint and cool, the smell of the river, mud and reeds and wet rope. The Tiber going about its oldest business in the dark, carrying the day's rain away to the sea, which will hand it back in time as weather. Nothing in this city is ever really spent. It all comes around again. Water, grain, embers, mornings. He stands at the bend for the length of a few slow breaths, a baker looking at an empire, unimpressed and fond. Then he turns for home. Marcus walks his small circuit and feels the day settle in his shoulders. The good tiredness, the kind with nothing owed behind it. At the corner by the old shrine he stops, as his father used to, and leaves a pinch of yesterday's crumb on the ledge for the household gods, or the sparrows, whichever arrives first. His father held that they were frequently the same thing. It is as sound a theology as any in the city. And so the evening goes on, slowly, the way evenings here always go. Lamp by lamp, door by door. There is nothing in it you need to follow, only streets going quiet in no particular order, and a man walking home in no particular hurry, and the night settling over the rooftops like a blanket drawn up by someone who loves the house. Then home, under a sky now fully dark and fully starred, down his own street, past the fountain, still falling, to his own narrow door beside the bakery's shuttered front. Up the creaking stairs past the places that creak, to the small room with the small window. Marcus undresses in the dark and lies down on the rope bed, under the woolen blanket, and lets out the long breath that men have let out at that exact moment, in that exact way, for as long as there have been beds and days. The house below him is quiet, but it is a living quiet, and he can read every line of it. The faint tick of the cooling bricks, the leaven on its shelf at its slow work, the banked embers under their ash, keeping the seed of tomorrow's fire. The whole patient household of small warm things, all tucked in, all breathing at their own speed, all waiting for morning without a single worry about whether it will come. Through the small window, the stars. They are the same stars, you know. That is the strange, kind thing about this story. Everything else in it is gone. The street, the shutters, the fountain, the voices, the man himself, all folded away into time like flour into dough. But the stars over that window are the stars over yours. On a clear night you can check. The same slow wheel, the same silver nails, the same drift toward morning. When you look at them, you and a tired Roman baker are, for a moment, in the same room. He does not count his worries because he keeps none in the bedroom. He thinks, in a loosening, unraveling way, of small good things. The dough came together well today. The old woman's knee predicted wind, and the wind came. She will be insufferable and delighted. There is enough flour for the week. The embers are banked. The bar is on the door. The fountain murmurs below, fallen and falling into its worn basin, the sound the street makes when it dreams. His thoughts begin to lose their edges now, the way yours may be losing theirs. One thought folding slowly into the next, the seams disappearing, everything becoming one soft, continuous thing that no longer needs watching. This is how sleep is made, and it is very like how bread is made. Nothing forced, nothing hurried, warmth and time doing the whole of the work, while the one it is happening to simply lies still and lets it. The city rocks itself with its cart rumble and its water. The watchman's lantern turns the far corner. The swifts are folded away under the eaves. The stars lean west by their fraction. Somewhere across the street, behind a wall, another sleeper turns over, sighs and settles. And the sound of it, though he does not wake to hear it, is company all the same. Sleep, when it comes for him, comes the way the tide comes in over flat sand. No single arriving wave, only a gradual deepening, until what was shore is quietly sea. First the day's sounds grow spacious, as if the room had grown. Then the sounds keep sounding, but stop meaning anything, which is the mind laying down its last tool. The fountain goes on talking, but it is talking to the street now, not to him. The bricks tick once more, unheard. Somewhere between one soft breath and the one after it, without ceremony, without a seam, Marcus is asleep, and the house, which was waiting for exactly this, settles a fraction deeper around him, the way a hand closes gently over a coin. If you are still here, still listening, still just this side of the tide, that's fine too. There is no door to catch, no moment to catch it. Stay as long as you like at the edge. The water is patient. It rises a breath at a time. It has never once failed to arrive. Tomorrow before dawn, in the quietest hour Rome ever knows, a man will wake without being called, and go down a dark stair he knows by heart, and kneel at a warm hearth, and breathe an old fire gently back to life. The water will already be falling at the corner, silver black under the last of the stars. The leaven will be ready. The whole slow, warm, patient day will be standing at the door. The same day, the good same day, waiting to be let in again. But that is hours away. Nothing is asked of anyone until then. Not of Marcus, asleep now under his woolen blanket in the bread-smelling dark. And not of you. The lamps go out, window by window, floor by floor, all over the sleeping city. The embers keep their warmth under the ash. The water falls and falls softly into stone. Sleep well.